Hey guys, it's Alex, and I'm at theweirdchurch.com, and today we're going to go over a small part in Matthew, which I love, because it's got Jesus in it. He does a bunch of weird crap all the time. It's pretty great. Today one of the things I'm talking about is we're going to Mark, we got Mark chapter 1, verse 12 through 20, which is where Jesus kind of runs into his disciples for the first time. So we look at 14, and it says, we'll go up to 12. It says, "At once the same Spirit pushed Jesus out of the wild." And we're doing the Message because it's really easy for everybody. If you want to use a different translation, you can. This one I like. "At once the same Spirit pushed Jesus out into the wild for 40 wilderness days and nights, and he was tested by Satan." So the 40 days and nights, it's another part of Scripture where it talks about this. Awesome. "Wild animals were his companions, and angels took care of him." That craziness sounds awesome. Like, wild animals were his companions. So, growing up in Alaska, or anybody who's a wilderness buff, you can kind of get that, like, seeing animals and stuff. But I wonder, when it says his companions, if he actually, hung out with them, or got to pet him, or, I don't know. Because Jesus was pretty much, he's a great guy. So maybe, a wolf would come up and let him pet him. And angels took care of him, which is pretty ridiculous when you think about it. I mean, who else of us has, angels taking care of us all the time? So, moving on to 14. "After John was arrested, Jesus went to Galilee preaching the message of God, and he said, 'Time's up! God's kingdom is here! Change your life and believe the message.'" Which is cool. He's just saying everybody's been waiting and waiting and waiting their entire existence for something to happen. And Jesus came to say, it's happening right now. This is the big change. "Passing along the beach of the Lake of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew net fishing. Fishing was their regular work. Jesus said to them, 'Come with me, I'll make you a new kind of fisherman. I'll show you how to catch men and women instead of perch and bass.' They didn't ask questions. They dropped their nets and followed." Now, this is ridiculous to me. Okay? Jesus walks up to a bunch of fishermen who they've never seen him before, essentially. And he just says, "Hey, you guys with gainful employment." In the Old Testament, being a fisherman was it was good work at the time. It was regular. It's like Jesus walking up to construction workers. Those guys get good money. And he says, "Oh, you should come follow me because I'll make you new fishermen, and you'll be fishers of men and women, and you'll catch them instead of fish." And what is it that Jesus, how can he do that? This is a part of Scripture where I go, nope, hold on. This is not, I can't just take that and run with it. You have to explain to me, because if I'm working a job, and some random guy comes in and says, "Hey, by the way, I know that you're working your job and you like it and you're good at it, but you should quit it right now and come with me, and I'm going to teach you how to win over people." I'm going to be like, "Oh, okay, no. Are you running some sort of get rich quick seminar, or are you going to teach me how to be a salesman, because I'm making money here and I'm doing this and I pretty much don't want to do that." But immediately the disciples dropped their nets and they went with him. What the heck? No, I'm sorry. That just doesn't make sense. So I started cracking into it and I said, what just happened with this? Because if I try that for myself, if I go over to Chipotle right now and those guys have never seen me, and I say, "Oh, by the way, you guys should quit your job and come with me and I'll teach you how to win people over and catch them," they're going to be like, "Okay, no, do you want a burrito or not?" And that's going to be it. And then they're going to ask me to leave, or the cops are going to come, or whatever. But these guys just went with Jesus. And apparently it says that he met them there, so he didn't know them or anything like that. So when I got into studying it, I think it was, I looked into some of Rob Bell's older work before he was a big controversy. And I looked at other sources too, and I started doing some research, and some of these, old textbooks that I have. Goodness, I've got where did I put it? Anyways, it doesn't matter. I've got Manners and Customs of the Bible and the Old Testament stuff, and I started looking up and I started seeing, I asked myself, I Googled, why would the disciples leave Jesus? And there was a really interesting story behind it. The idea is that back in the Old Testament, rabbis were the big deal. There are certain times in history where religious officials are huge. Like nowadays, somebody comes in, they're like, hey, I'm a pastor. Everybody's like, nobody cares. Everybody's a pastor. You can go online and get certified in like 24 hours. You know? But back a while ago, and even in certain parts of the world now, being a religious official is a huge deal because you had to be incredibly intelligent to be involved in that. It was like doctors, lawyers, priests, right? I mean, it was the big deal. And even in the Jewish culture now, rabbis are a big deal. They're not a dime a dozen. You have to go to a long set of school and series and everything. And in order to be like a preacher these days, you just pretty much have to open up a webcam and start talking. Oh, I like this guy. And, you know, so it didn't seem like that big of a deal. But back then, it was huge. And so everybody wanted to be a rabbi. Because you have to think it's the Jewish culture. And the Jewish culture back then, the biggest thing in the world was to be a rabbi. Like, every mother wanted their daughter to marry a rabbi. Rabbis were like the most sought after in the world because they knew God and they sought God and they talked about God and their whole life was about that. And they were handled very well. They were wealthy. It was good. And so people would go through scores of training, and if they didn't make the cut, then they would have to leave school and just go get a different job. They just would. It's like they wouldn't be admitted into college. The university at the time would just be like, hey, you're not smart enough, and so just go get a job on a farm or something, you know. And so a lot of times the farmers of the day and the carpenters and the fishermen, they weren't in that job because they had any other choice. They just picked it up. And this is the way it is. America is very unique in the sense of we have a lot of opportunities where people can kind of, and it's like that in a lot of the other world too, where people can decide, oh, I need to go to university, and they say, no, I'm going to, and they push through, and there's ways of getting like financial aid and all of this other stuff, and they can just do it. In other countries, it's not like that. Even today, if a university says you can't go to school, you don't have enough money, or you're not smart enough, you're just out of the loop. So Jesus being a rabbi was a big deal because people at the time wanted to follow rabbis and wanted to be around rabbis, and they wanted to be awesome like that. And so when Jesus came along and he was a rabbi, he basically said, hey, drop your nets and come follow me. I'm going to train you. Well, this is the equivalent of like Yoda or Obi-Wan Kenobi walking up to a bunch of guys working on a droid out in the sand dunes of, like, wherever, and saying, oh, by the way, I'm a Jedi. You can see my lightsaber hanging on my belt. Come with me, and I'm going to train you the ways of the Force. No wonder they got up and left. They left that business right there. They tossed down their nets, and they're like, that guy's got a lightsaber. I'm going to go with the guy with the lightsaber. I'm going to be a Jedi. This is going to be sweet, right? Because rabbis at the time were like the Jedi of the world. I mean, you even see like past history where like Elijah's calling down fire from heaven and like, you know, it was crazy. Even just look at Jesus in the future. He's got like water and wine and he's healing people and all this other stuff. Who wouldn't want to be a Jedi? And so the idea that comes behind this section and what we're reading today is that Jesus was a Jedi. Or, in that sense, he was a rabbi, and he was awesome. And so when he goes up to them and says, toss down your nets and come follow me, that's the reason that they followed him. They wanted the training that they always went for. They were told they weren't good enough. They went to work with their family, became fishermen. They were happy. They were doing good. They had a trade. They were making money and getting by. We've all had to get a job before. But when they had somebody come up who was amazing at what they did, and they could see clearly, dressed like a rabbi, looks like a rabbi, talks like a rabbi, and says, come follow me, I'm going to train you in this way, they immediately jumped on the opportunity. I mean, wouldn't you? Yoda shows up with a lightsaber and says, come with me. I'm not going to ask questions. I'm just going to follow the green guy. So that's my message today. Crack open Mark, crack open Matthew. Really good stories in there, and I'll explain some more later. You guys are awesome.